Welcome to Doc Discussions with Dr. Jason Edwards, brought to you by St. Luke's, St. Louis.
Hello, welcome to Doc Discussions. I'm Jason Edwards, and I'm here today with Dan McCormack. Dan, how you doing today, sir?
I'm very good. How are you?
Very good. And so you help lead our foundation or the philanthropy part.
Yeah, we don't have
St.
a
Luke's.
foundation here, so it's just the development office.
The Office of Development. Okay, so what's your technical title?
Vice President and Executive Director of Development for St. Luke's Hospital.
Very good. Very good. So, and a lot of development is the philanthropy side of St. Luke's,
That's
right?
it. That's it.
Yeah. How do you get into something like this? I don't remember this being a major in high school.
Actually, there are
Or in
majors
college.
there are majors out there now.
Really?
There weren't then. And I think like a lot of it, I got into it kind of backwards or sideways.
Sure.
And there aren't a whole lot of people who do what I do that have philanthropy or fundraising degrees. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure I'd trust them if they did, because I think when you come at something indirectly, I think you acquire a bit of seasoning that you kind of need for interacting with people and understanding what people want to do with their money, with their gifts, whatever. So yeah, I from the day I got out of law school, pretty much the day I got out of law school, I was always working in a nonprofit organization, first with hospitals, then with the university, then back into healthcare again. But initially with the healthcare part of things, I wasn't doing fundraising. I was doing administrative work and then legal work for hospitals. And then had an opportunity to jump from healthcare into higher ed when a position opened up on my alma mater.
Now, where did you go to school at?
This was Rice University in Houston.
Rice,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So
great college.
Yeah. So I was working in the Texas Medical Center, first at Methodist Hospital and then at Texas Heart Institute. And while I was at Texas Heart, literally, I was just one Sunday morning just flipping through the newspaper, looking at one ads, just sort of seeing what's out there. That was back when there were one ads in newspapers, and I'm that old. And there was a position in there to work. Physically, it was in the development office at Rice, but functionally, it worked for the president of the university and doing a lot of his speeches and correspondence and prep work and things like that. And so I applied for that job, and I'd done a whole lot of staff work for CEOs up until that point in time. And so I kind of knew the mindset. And so I was able to get into Rice. I got that job. And within 6 months, I was talking with the VP of development and said, I've got bandwidth to do more. And so I ended up taking on responsibility for all development office communications, not just the president's office, but all of them. And that kind of got me into fundraising.
How long did you do that at Rice?
I did that for 96 to early 2000. So almost 4 years.
And I have to imagine, I mean, Rice's endowment has to be over, it was $1 billion now.
Oh, I think it's closer.
Multi-billion,
yeah, it's
right?
multi-billion now. At that point in time, depending on who you talk to, Rice, because its student population was still pretty small. It's gotten progressively bigger since then. But Rice at that point in time may have had the largest endowment per student. If you took the total endowment and divided by number of students, Rice may have had the largest endowment per student. If it wasn't, it was top 3 or 4.
Yeah. And Texas is kind of fertile ground with all the oil money there and everything else that, the SMU and the TCU,
Absolutely.
They do well.
Yeah, they do well. And the fact is, and you've got multiple institutions, like you mentioned, University of Texas, Texas A&M, SMU, Rice, Baylor, all have very, very generous donors that all seem to pull from completely different pots of money. There's that much to go around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This kind of maybe a side topic here, but I think people would be very shocked at the percentage of ones, if you have a high net worth individual, the overall percentage they actually end up donating throughout their life.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, many people will donate more than 50% of every dollar they ever earned.
Yeah.
That's I would assume not uncommon.
I think it's not. I mean, and you see more and more people. I mean, you've got essentially, the Buffetts and the Gates of the world that are saying, I'm not giving anything to my kids, or I'm giving a very small portion. Now, of course, when Bill Gates, I mean, I saw the arithmetic that when Bill Gates says, I'm only going to give like 1% to each of my kids. I'm like, well, you've made them multimillionaires, even just that 1%.
Oh, sure.
But I think Buffett said, I'm not giving them anything. They're doing fine.
Yeah, I actually think his children work for his foundation.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, the generosity out there is really amazing.
Yeah.
And so then you started getting into the hospitals, working for the Texas Medical Center. For those who don't know, Texas Medical Center is like 40 or 50 hospitals, all right in one area, not far from Rice.
No, it's actually literally across the street, across Main Street from Rice. And so at that point in time, there weren't, I mean, it was big, but it wasn't the metropolis that it is right now. I mean, people that aren't familiar with the Texas Medical Center and they fly into Houston, when they fly over it, they think they're flying over downtown Houston. Downtown Houston has the even larger buildings just to the north a little bit. But, every one of these, I mean, whether it's Methodist or there's a St. Luke's there, MD Anderson, Baylor, Baylor College of Medicine, Memorial Hermann, all these hospitals. Then you've got all these little subspecialty hospitals. You've got rehab hospitals. You've got the Texas Heart Institute. You've got all these other things around there. It's a medical megalopolis these days. And it supports this whole industry of these peripheral hotels and stuff like that, because people are coming in from all over the world to the Texas Medical Center for care.
Yeah. I happened to interview at MD Anderson many years back, and amazing experience. I mean, just seeing what it was, there's only one place in the world like that.
No, exactly. And, when I was there, 40 years ago, that it was, MD Anderson was big and it had a great reputation, but it exploded. I mean, it just went off the map, off the charts in terms of what its capacity is, its catchment from around the world of people coming to MD Anderson for one-of-a-kind, state-of-the-art care. Yeah,
for sure. And so I'm going to switch gears here. Yeah. So on a day-to-day operation, what kind of things are you doing?
I mean, it varies. I mean, so first of all, I mean, most of what we're doing and most of what we should be doing is just relationship building. And that takes a variety of different forms. And so a lot of what we're doing is sort of mapping out and executing an annual calendar that says, okay, if it's whatever this is, the second or third Wednesday in September, this is what we're doing. Okay, this is where we are in terms of our calendar of mailings, our calendar of events, and all these things, all these mailings, all these events are designed for us to just maintain some type of contact flow with donors and with people that aren't donors. So we'll look out over the course of a year and say in any given month or span of time, St. Luke's is going to have X number of inpatients, Y number of emergency room visits or outpatient visits to an ambulatory surgery center or someplace outside, Z number of physician office visits. And we legally have access to all that information for fundraising purposes. We can't necessarily know what a patient's specific diagnosis is or the type of treatment they got, but we're allowed to know that they were patients of the hospitals, patients of our physicians. And then it's up to us to sort of say, what are we going to do with that information? And so we'll do some degree of data segmentation and then start this sort of method or route of contacting these individuals, seeing if they have any interest whatsoever in supporting the hospital. And then, what happens is that when they say yes the first time, okay, then it's up to us to make sure that they say yes again. And so now you've got another calendar of activities that sort of say, okay, once a person says, okay, yeah, I had great care. Dr. Edwards saved my life. Here's $100. What are we doing then to see what we can do to trigger that generosity and encourage that person to make a gift in the future? Yeah.
Yeah, there's now I think people can look at this two ways. Somebody could look at that critically and say, hey, people are coming to the hospital and you're badgering them for money. It's a pretty gentle ask.
Yeah.
And to be honest, people out there, there are plenty of people who are looking to find a place to put their hard-earned dollars, and they're happy that you've connected with them so they can actually, you've kind of solved a problem for them.
Yeah, and I think that, I try really hard, and sometimes you've got to be very careful about when you get into the business of philanthropy, and it's very easy to sort of put on this almost mercenary mindset that says, if I don't raise this money, I'm not successful at my job, and and you get this sort of sales or transactional mentality to it. And I've always sort of been much more inclined to think to just keep reminding myself that what we're asking these people for is a gift. And if you're badgering them for it, if you're trying to, make them feel guilty or compel them to give to you, it's not a gift.
Sure.
We want to trigger, realistically, we're triggering, we hope we're triggering some type of personal emotional response wired around gratitude in our case. Now, healthcare philanthropy is slightly different from higher ed fundraising in that way, in that although most higher ed donors have some degree of alumni connection. When you're talking about something like Rice University, Texas, you've got these huge institutional donors and foundations, Houston Endowment, organizations like that, the Brown Foundation in Houston, that, there are some alumni that are involved in those things, but mostly that's just the estates of multimillionaires or billionaires that have set this money aside to give to community organizations. And there's not a whole lot of gratitude involved. But most of the personal connections that are happening at universities are with alumni who feel a sense of gratitude for the education they received or the relationships that they built with the university. In healthcare, you're triggering that same sense of gratitude. It was the care that I received. We're hoping that we're talking to patients, past patients, that feel better now than they did when they first accessed our care. And want to express some degree of thanks, either for the immediate care that they received, either as a cancer patient that got treated and they're successfully in remission right now, or just because they're thankful because even if they didn't receive care, they live in the neighborhood and they know that if there's an emergency, that there's a really good hospital that they can go to and be taken care of. If I were fundraising, and I've never done this before, but if I were fundraising for a cultural organization, it's a completely different. Then you're getting more of that community response. Then it's the people that say, I really want St. Louis to have a top symphony or a great opera or this wonderful botanical gardens or the zoo. And you're triggering that kind of community benefit response. But here, we're talking almost entirely out of gratitude.
Yeah. So this kind of goes into what do you think the what do you think the main psychological points of giving are? What do you think when you think of? I'm sure you've looked into this. You're a smart guy.
Yeah, I probably haven't looked into it as much as I should, because it does fascinate me a little bit.
Or what have you noticed? Not from books, but from on the street.
Well, no. What I've noticed is that a lot of times donors are grateful to us when they make those. We're of course grateful to them. They've given us a gift. It's got one or two commas. Maybe it doesn't have any commas in it. Maybe it's $50 or $25. But when you have those conversations with those donors, they view that gift as just an extension of their gratitude, and it feels good. It's the way that I would liken it to the way that we feel. Christmas or birthdays or whatever, when we give gifts to other people.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, well, yeah, it's my daughter's birthday. I kind of have to give her a gift. All right. But I feel good doing it.
Yeah. I think too, when people donate, it gives them a sense of purpose too. It does. It says, I'm taking my hard-earned work, right, which obviously the dollars are a representation of that. Sure. And I'm using it to try to make the world a better place.
I think that's it. And there's a little bit of paying it forward too. That you will find patients that will say to you, I want to make sure that somebody else who comes along the road that has the same condition that I have, the same diagnosis that I have, can get the same treatment that I have, even if they don't have the means that I do.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so, and kind of what better place for it to go than something that your friends and neighbors could also benefit from.
Exactly.
We do spend millions of dollars a year here at St. Luke's on charity care.
Yep.
And it's important for people to know that hospitals oftentimes, most of the times, have a single digit margin, operating margin, if not negative.
That's correct.
Plenty of hospitals, I think in 2024, it was about a third of hospitals lost money, but they're willing to do that because they feel that it's an obligation to the community to do that, and they're willing to spend money on things that the community needs, even if they lose money.
I think that's right. And I think, the vast majority of hospitals in the United States are nonprofit organizations. And if you're in a nonprofit organization, you've only got three ways of getting money. You can earn it through the services that you provide or the investments that you make. You can borrow it from banks or the bond market, or you can ask for it.
Yeah.
And, and the tax code is set up to make asking for it, a positive stream of revenue for nonprofit organizations. I mean, that's why the tax code continues to allow individuals to deduct, charitable contributions. And I think that, and as you sort of referenced, that payment streams aren't getting any more expansive. The days of Medicare or the government saying, what did it cost? Oh, here, we'll pay you what it costs.
Yeah.
Okay. They're not paying you what it costs. They're paying you what they think it's worth.
Yep.
And it's designed to have very, very tight margins, which means that, hospitals have to cost shift. Okay. The government's only going to pay us, 90 cents on the dollar, maybe less than that, 60 cents on the dollar, which means we've got to charge $1.40 on the dollar for the private side. And at the end of the day, you're kind of working yourself to a status quo. You're kind of like just sort of saying, okay, if we can break even or just get 1 or 2 percentage points above break even,
Exactly.
that's great. Except for the fact that it doesn't give you any opportunity to make these sort of future investments. So
a new building,
a new building, or, in what you do, technology is changing so dramatically, and if you, I don't know what equipment in radiation oncology was like 30 years ago, but I bet it's a whole lot more effective now. And it also costs a lot more.
For sure. Yeah. So that we use linear accelerators, they cost, just the machine alone is, $2 to $4 million plus the maintenance of the room.
Right.
So if anybody's listening out there and, wants to find a place to put their hard-earned dollars, we're welcome, and we'll be happy to name a room after you.
But that's to your point then. I mean, if the hospital's sitting there scraping by on these really tiny margins, then you've either got to wait a really, really long time before you can muster enough capital to go out and buy yourself a new linear accelerator.
Yeah.
You've got to pull it off your balance sheet, which is not necessarily a good idea, because essentially what you're doing right then is, if you're taking it out of your savings account, you're depriving yourself, or your investment account especially, your investment
income vehicle.
Right now, you could have money on your balance sheet that's earning you 8, 10 more percent, in the investment market. Well, now I'm not going to have that anymore because I've got to spend the cash to buy this equipment and take money out of my savings to do it. Or you come to the development office and you say, can we ask people for financial support to get us this new piece of equipment? And the answer to that is almost always going to be, yeah. I mean, it's going to take work to do it, but we can do it.
And that's because the operating margins are so narrow, 1%, 2%, -1%, 2%.
Yeah.
That makes philanthropy, especially at a hospital, invaluable.
Yeah.
I mean, these universities that have $1 billion in the bank that's making, that's putting off 8% per year.
Right.
That, keep, investing in your colleges, but it's your neighborhood hospital, your local hospital is really important. And I think it's a good place to park some dollars that would probably give you the biggest bang for your buck and making a difference in people's lives.
Doc Discussions with Dr. Jason Edwards. Brought to you by St. Luke's, St. Louis.
Yeah, and I think by and large, people, when they see, even though, by the time they get their EOB and have to make their payment or whatever their copay or their deductibles are, they're still, when they see the sort of the root bill for hospital services, and they're like, that cost me that much. And then they look, okay, good. I had insurance through my employer or whatever, but they're still, I think, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the money that's in healthcare. Mm-hmm. And because we have these conversations with donors and prospects all the time, that they can't believe that any organization that charges that much for that procedure could possibly only have a 1 or 2% or even a negative margin. You're like, how's that possible?
Yeah.
And I think it's our duty to sort of continue to work with those donors about the relationship, because as you said, I mean, even these universities, the Harvards, the University of Texas, the Princetons of the world that have these massive endowments, those alumni are still lining up to write checks.
Which is kind of, I mean, Harvard has about a $50 billion endowment. It's like, it's pretty insane. So endowments are super important. Donations are super important. Large donations, small donations, and we hope that it's something that gives, meaning to people's lives when they do donate. That it makes them feel better.
I mean, that's what makes me. I mean, to be honest with you, asking people for money isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. But I go into it every time reminding myself that what I'm actually doing is giving them an opportunity to feel good.
Yeah.
And frankly, if they felt like I was whipsawing them into writing a check or making a gift, I wouldn't feel bad. I'd feel bad about it. I wouldn't feel good about the outcome. And so I go into that sort of when I ask somebody if they would consider making sometimes really large, what we would consider to be sacrificial gifts that make them have to really think about where that money is going to come from in order to pay off that pledge. They're actually motivated to do it, and they feel good about it.
And we can't do it because of HIPAA laws and things like that, but I wish people could see the patients that they make a difference, that makes a huge difference in their lives.
Sure.
There's all kinds of people every year that we're able to help, and that we, may not be able to do otherwise. And it's, fortunately for me, I get to see that.
Right.
And kind of unfortunately for the donors, they don't get to see, the faces.
Yeah.
But it's just the way it has to be. We have to have privacy, but I can tell you firsthand, it makes a huge difference in the lives of your, fellow, citizens.
And I think on my side of the street, one of the things that we can do a better job of, I think, for the patients is really kind of connecting the dots for them with the donors that made it possible. I mean, you walk around the hospital and you see all kinds of plaques and signage and things like that says, this room, this thing, generously donated by. But really, as you said, we can't always make those one-to-one personal connections where, let somebody talk on the phone or actually know who, meet the donors and things like that. But I think that it's a meaningful exercise for us to try and make those connections as resonant as possible, so that one of your patients understands that it was donors that bought that linear accelerator, or even just refurnish the infusion area, whatever it was,
Sure.
that things like that go on, that we make those connections between the recipients and the donors.
Yeah, and obviously it's everybody works hard for their money, and it's hard to part with, and I would think it would be. I've never asked anybody for a donation. I think I have difficult conversations with people every day. I think it would be very difficult for me to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy thing to do, but for the hospital and for most hospitals to remain viable, it's an essential thing that we have to do to stay in the game.
Yeah, I think in your case, I'm just speaking out of turn here, but I think what's challenging for you is you've got to either have a real separation there, or be able to make a real pivot between, look, I have to have a conversation with this person about their care plan, and I've got to divorce that from the fact that I know that they're,
So I can't. I have a hard time asking people for a review, even,
right?
Because I never want them to think our relationship is transactional, because it's not.
Right.
I never know what anybody's insurance is. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
And I never want a patient to ever think that I was doing this for some other gain than just to try to cure their cancer.
But on the other hand, I will tell you that if I had a donor that wasn't one of your patients, didn't have any immediate connection to you, maybe there was an institutional donor or a corporation there or something that I felt that they had a pretty strong connection to what we wanted to do in cancer, I wouldn't hesitate to put you in that room.
Sure. Yeah, that would be easier. Than if it was somebody I didn't treat. for sure. And so what do you think the future holds for philanthropy in general?
I wonder sometimes because, on the one hand, I mean, we've got a tax code that encourages, this that encourages generosity, that encourages philanthropy, but it's getting more and more sort of constrained and pinched. And so even things like, increasing the standard deduction.
Yep.
Okay. Has this unintended consequence of creating a whole tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of non-itemizers now. Mm-hmm. And so people are like, well, if I'm not itemizing, then do I really care about charitable contributions? And so, and with every sort of tax cut or deficit projection or things like that, there's always these rumblings that the tax code is going to change dramatically and that we're going to say goodbye to the charitable deduction. And and I think that's a threat. I think that realistically, though, I look at and say, every 4 years, the number of people and the dollars that are poured into the political system for political contributions, for which there are no charitable contributions. Okay. And those people aren't necessarily, they think they're getting access or whatever, but they're pouring tens of millions of dark money into these black PACs or whatever they call these things, super PACs, yeah, and stuff like that. And that still happens in the absence of a tax deduction. So I think if the future of philanthropy from a tax perspective, I think it's still strong. I think it would just force us to change our messaging a little bit, but we'd still have to do the same job of connecting donors with beneficiaries and what they wanted to do, and they wouldn't necessarily need a tax. I'm not even sure that donors, are that motivated by the tax deduction.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a nice benefit, but I think they're motivated to. It's kind of transmuting their hard work into making a difference for people who are around them, and it makes them feel like they've done something positive with their life.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you'll see happening, and it may not happen directly with the tax code in terms of the deduction, but it could happen indirectly with the tax code in terms of saying so. So right now in the IRS code, you have, if you are religious, educational, or charitable, okay? Those are kind of the big three terms for what qualifies you to be a nonprofit organization, a 501c3. And so there's really nothing in the tax code. The words healthcare don't appear together in Section 501c3 that says that would say a hospital, like a university, a private university, is per se nonprofit. And so that's why nonprofit hospitals have to do community benefit reporting. And so this is how many millions of dollars we provide every year in uncompensated care. This is how many other programs we do in the communities that we don't get paid for.
Yeah.
And so we have to earn our nonprofit status in the way that universities and churches don't.
Yeah.
And I could actually see, I could see the IRS code even being amended to sort of say healthcare doesn't count anymore. Education doesn't count anymore. Even stuff what's going on right now with taxing endowments, saying to these private universities that $100 billion, it's like the luxury tax in baseball or football. It's sort of like now you guys have to pay for having such large endowments in a way that wouldn't have been conscionable 20 years ago. And so I could see on the corporate side of things, the tax code changing to say, you guys are no longer nonprofit organizations. And so, the symphonies and the zoos and the cultural organizations, they're still providing this kind of benefit. We're going to let them stay as nonprofit organizations because they don't make enough money to threaten any of that. But hospitals and these big universities and stuff like that, you guys all lose your tax exemption.
And of course, this is all just, here none of this has happened.
Right.
And my guess would be it would happen to a university way before it would happen to a hospital.
I think that's right.
A lot of these universities are kind of in hedge funds with a college attached to it.
That's it.
And so they kind of have become asymmetric.
Yeah.
But
I think the bigger threat from that would be just the messaging threat that all of a sudden, if the word from the government was these organizations aren't nonprofit because they don't need your support anymore, we'd have to swim upstream against that. And that would be the challenge, is making sure that we still maintain our connection with donors that said, no, we still very much need your support, because getting rid of, the tax deduction isn't going to make CMS pay us any more for Medicare or Medicaid.
Yeah. Well, Dan, thanks so much for your time.
Oh, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, sir. And thank you for all the hard work that you and your team do through the Office of Development.
It's a pleasure.
And so if somebody wants to get a hold of St. Luke's Philanthropy, they can go to the Office of Development's website.
Exactly.
You can type in Friends of St. Luke's, and that will take you there as well.
Yeah. If you go to the St. Luke's website, up in the upper right corner, there's a little box that says I want to. You click on I want to, and that'll take you to make a gift, which will take you into the entire development apparatus.
Yeah. And so as an experiment, click on that and make a small donation and see if you feel a little bit better about yourself.
There you go. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Join us next time for Doc Discussions with Dr. Jason Edwards. It's medicine for your body, mind, and spirit.